If you've been listening to In the Loop every single week, you'll know that we have quite high quality standards. We spend a lot of time trying to find the perfect episode, the best way of telling the story, and we really care about the production. Today, that means trying something new. This is going to be our first ever interview, and honestly, I hope you're going to love it. I got to speak to somebody who spent 25 years trying to fix what can only be described as a broken system that fails millions of people every single day. And getting to sit down with her to dig into her story and her beliefs was so much fun. She's an expert in the topic, she's a fantastic speaker, and an author. And it's the exact type of conversations that I want to bring you more of. I'm Jack Horton, and this is In the Loop. Today I'm investigating a question that affects every working person. Who decided this is learning? And why hasn't AI fixed it yet? Picture this, it's Monday morning. Sarah, a customer service manager at a Fortune 500 company, just woke up to learn that she has to complete her digital communications best practice course by tomorrow morning. 45 minutes of clicking through slides about not sharing inappropriate photos into a company Slack channel. Meanwhile, another company just down the road has implemented an AI system that handles 60% of all customer support inquiries. In 6 months, Sarah's job may not even exist. But hey, at least she's compliant. This isn't hypothetical. This is happening at companies across the world, whilst the largest workforce transformation in human history unfolds around us. AI systems are already writing code, diagnosing diseases, creating art, and making decisions that used to require entire teams of people. We're in what experts call the great upskill. We need to rapidly train people to do things machines can't. Creative problem solving, emotional intelligence, complex reasoning, and decision-making skills. Yet the very thing that should be helping people succeed is currently failing most people. That's learning, specifically learning at work. Companies spend hundreds of billions of dollars on global training every single year. That's more than the GDP of some countries. And yet, when was the last time you took a workplace training course that you actually found helpful? That felt relevant to your challenges and that made you demonstrably better at what you do. Research has shown that most training is forgotten within 24 hours. To understand this crisis, I spoke to someone who'd been inside the system, someone who'd not just witnessed all the dysfunction, but who'd lived, breathed it, and spent her career trying to fix it, and came across the solution from a very unlikely place. A hospital emergency room, a bottle of vodka, and a moment of panic at 30,000 feet. This is the story of how workplace learning got broken and how we might be able to fix it with AI. To find answers, I spoke to Niles-Hofmann, who spent 25 years in educational technology, working as a chief learning officer at major corporations and advising some of the biggest companies in the entire world on how to deliver great learning experiences.
I think there's a number of reasons. If you look at early e-learning, and I'll focus on the digital type of content, early e-learning was really about compliance. So it was all, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do this. So it was written in such an artificial way. There wasn't any storytelling. And so people kind of had that dread when they went into it the very first time because they knew what it was going to be, right? It wasn't going to be engaging. It wasn't going to be anything of interest. And basically, what they were effectively reading was not even learning. It was a legal document to protect the company.
A legal document, not working. And when I did a little bit more digging, I found that once upon a time in the 1950s, you'd learn through apprenticeships. You'd be working alongside masters, getting real-time feedback and practicing skills in context. And now picture corporate learning today. Lots of boring videos that are very rarely helpful. This shift happened gradually, then incredibly fast. In the 1990s, companies started moving training online to save costs. And then as corporate scandals like Enron and WorldCom wiped billions off the market, new laws made compliance legally required. Suddenly, the primary purpose of corporate training shifted from developing people to protecting companies from lawsuits. So what started as a cost-saving measure became a legal necessity. And legal necessities, once embedded in corporate bureaucracy, become really difficult to change.
So the company says, well, Jack read this, so therefore tick mark, Jack will not launder money. That is essentially what it was doing for one example. I think the second one is a lot of people that get into corporate learning actually don't know learning. They have gone through school in some way, shape, or form, and creates this fallacy that because they've gone through school, they automatically know how learning works, and they have quote unquote a passion for learning. And I have a passion for brain surgery, but you wouldn't allow me to ever perform that on anyone, living or probably even expired. I think one of the worst ones I ever had to do was the company was launching an internal tool that at the time was very similar to Slack and Yammer, but before those tools were ubiquitous. And it was not an e-learning on how to use the tools. It was basically all the things you could and could not say. Basically, how to be, in general, a good human being. I mean, it even had things in it like, please do not share photos that depict people without clothes on. And I thought, well, I mean, this surely does not need to be an e-learning. This has to be just a simple code of conduct. 45 minutes, people had to go through that. And what ended up happening is everyone was afraid to even use the tool because the rules got so ridiculous, and came down to you can't tag more than 3 people and just stupid stuff.
I think Laura's example perfectly illustrates this focus on compliance over developing people. Launching internal communication tools, something that should encourage collaboration, but then made people watch 45-minute courses that were so restrictive that people feared even using the system. The resistance isn't to development, it's to dysfunction. But I wanted to know, why are we still stuck in this same place then? A big part of the answer lies in something that most people have never heard of, that controls almost all corporate learning across the world, and it's called SCORM.
So SCORM is this funny little piece of technology that used to be really relevant. It's called a shared content object, basically, is what it is. And it used to be that learning was for compliance. So you needed to be able to prove that, okay, Jack took this hour-long course. He passed the test at over 80%. We know what questions he got right and wrong. We know the date he did it on. Yay. All good. And we send that to the regulators. Okay. So if Jack ever does something wrong, we can pull that and say, well, clearly, it wasn't our fault because he passed the module. Now, that's old school learning, but that's what we used to have in like 2000. Okay.
So SCORM is this technical standard, basically a set of rules about how e-learning should be packaged up and delivered to people. And it was created in the early 2000s with only one goal: compliance tracking.
But what SCORM does is SCORM became the package that all learning had to be in order for it to be interpreted and understood by a learning management system. But what SCORM does not do is also take into account suspended data. What do I mean by that? Well, if you backtrack in a module, or if you do a branching exercise, or if you only watch a portion of a video, or if you're learning something that isn't on the learning management system, say you see something on Slack and whatnot, that may not even track as part of your learning canon. And so as a result of that, we got locked into this click next to continue type module. And I feel for instructional designers and learning experience designers, because there's only so much you can do with that. Like, there really is only so much you can do. But that's how we ended up with the drag and drop, and that's how we ended up with those really boring things, because that's all we could do.
So there's the problem. SCORM became the dominant standard that almost all these learning management systems, so the software that companies use to deliver training, was historically built around. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry that had a financial incentive to maintain this system. But this raises a bigger question. If SCORM is so limiting, why hasn't it been replaced? And why are we still stuck with this 25-year-old standard designed for compliance training in an era where personalization and adaptation should be possible, in an era where developing people has become more important than ever?
Oh, easy answer to that: money, right? So if you think about what marketing is doing, it's generating leads, it's generating interest and engagement with a product that's ultimately going to lead to a sale. And there's a much, much, much larger pool of people that you are say, tempted to reach out to if, say, you are a company that makes trainers, right? I mean, you're going to say, yes, I absolutely will pay to get a million, ads or whatever to targeted ads to people, and because that's what you do as a company, right? Learning the reason it is a slower thing, or was, because things are changing, is because even if you think of software manufacturers and you think of where the revenue is, it's not in somebody doing a learning course, right? Because there's nothing that they're buying at the end of it.
In other words, there's not a financial incentive to innovate in learning in the same way as marketing or sales technology. Marketing technology advanced so rapidly because targeting and personalization directly translated into more sales. And, well, where's the ROI of helping someone learn better?
But the problem is AI, and I'm using that as a vernacular. Okay, so when I say AI, because I'm trying not to mention specific tools, um, they're not going to be able to break into that. It's not going to be in a digestible format for them, and they're probably going to be looking for, say, the script. And it's really hard to keep those scripts up to date because anytime you make even a micro change, you've got to go back and update all of them, reload, all of that sort of stuff.
Not only are we stuck with SCORM, a 25-year-old learning idea, but modern systems can't actually help us escape it because AI can't read that format. It's like being trapped in this digital time capsule.
So that's the other barrier for content to be able to be ingested and put into essentially a RAG that combines knowledge management and L&D content. So it's kind of like you're going to have L&D speaks German, but knowledge management speaks French, and the agent only speaks, or coach only speaks French. So it would only be able to pull from one. That's kind of the analogy there.
The irony is almost painful. We're living in an age where AI could transform learning experiences, but for AI to understand the information, it must be able to understand SCORM, but it can't actually ingest all of that information and do anything with it. So this is the real villain of the story, a technical standard that's holding an industry hostage. Luckily, Laurie has discovered something that could change everything, and it came from an unexpected place. Now, Laurie's about to tell you a story that involves airport vodka and a medical emergency, and while it might seem like a detour, the story contains the key to understanding how we have to be able to fix learning.
So what happened was, I'm afraid of flying. I was in North Carolina, and I had to take a small plane, and I mean small, like 12-seater type, tiny little plane from Raleigh, North Carolina to Toronto, and there was going to be storms, so I was absolutely not happy. So don't judge me. I looked around for someplace I could have a glass of wine. Well, I was informed that there is actually no bar in that wing of the airport. So I said, well, I'll go to the duty free. And I bought myself, again, please don't judge. It was desperate times. I bought myself, of course, the liter bottle that they sell at duty free. They don't sell the small ones, of vodka. And I thought, well, I'll just make a little drink. And the gentleman said to me, we don't get this till you land. We can't give it to you now. I was like, ugh. So what ended up happening was I told the woman at the gate, I explained I'm afraid of flying. And she said, okay, look, I'm going to tell you, as soon as your plane lands, you're going to run to the other terminal, have a drink of a glass of wine, and come back. And I will get you on this plane. And I said, okay, fine. She goes, okay, plane landed. She looked at me. She's like, go. I run to the other terminal, run outside, go through, get a glass of wine, come back, and I get on the plane. I survived, obviously. It was a terrible ride. But anyway, the point of the story was when I went to get off the plane, I was so tense from the flight that I wrenched my back and I threw my back out, taking out my luggage. And what they had to do was put me on a wheelchair and push me through the airport. At this point, I'm crying. My mascara is running. And what happened is the guy from the airplane runs up to me. He can smell alcohol in my breath, and he hands me my liter-size bottle of vodka. And that's how I was clutching it and being wheeled through Toronto Pearson.
But the story doesn't just end there. What happened next will completely change how Laurie thought about learning.
The point is my husband then, because I couldn't move, everything seized up. I had to go to the hospital. And that was where I saw the process that happens when you go into an A&E. So you weren't seen by a nurse right away. In fact, there was a kiosk and it asks you certain questions. Are you experiencing heart palpitations? Do you have chest pain? Are you running a fever? Where have you traveled? This was even pre-COVID. It did take my blood pressure. There was a cuff that I could use to take my blood pressure. It asked me, are you conscious? I'm like, clearly I am if I've done all these other things. But that triage was what then went to the nurse and it decided who got to be seen by that intake nurse first. Then what happened is they looked at everybody that was sitting in the A&E, and it determined who was going to go first based on their urgency, based on also what specialties doctors they had available that had time. You weren't seen in the order you appeared. You were seen according to the severity of your injuries and what needed to be treated right away and what you had resources for. If you flip that into learning, what you need to look at is that if you took all of your learning requests and put them in order, you're essentially making somebody who might be having a heart attack wait while somebody who maybe has a splinter, gets seen first. And that's not effective. It's not using your resources effectively. It's not helping the business.
This is the fundamental insight into how you could revolutionize workplace learning. Right now, most corporate learning experiences operate like a fast food restaurant. Everyone gets the same thing in the same order. But what happens if it could operate like an emergency room, personalized and prioritized and optimized for real need? But we still face that problem of the world of learning being built around SCORM, compliance, and having this annual planning cycle around learning that makes agility almost impossible.
Because of the way that L&D is set up, and typically what happens in a learning company, and I'm talking about enterprise. So for any listeners who are, working more in a medium size or especially a small size, you will probably be a lot more agile than this because you haven't had to deal with this type of structure. But in an enterprise company, and that's maybe dealing with 50,000 employees, what they do is they set budget at the beginning of the year and say, okay, this is what we're going to build. And I call it the bun fight. What happens is all the business partners come in, you sit in a room, and everybody gives like their magic list of what they would like to have built that year that will help them. And you do this, and then the business signs off and says, okay, and I will give you this amount of budget. And your performance reviews are going to be based on whether you hit the targets for those numbers or whether you did not.
Picture this playing out across an entire organization. In January, you're having to plan what skills people are going to need for December. And by the time December arrives, those skills might be completely irrelevant because the world changed. But you've already spent money on SCORM courses.
I mean, the one that I tell in the book was a bank that when we just put in a central intake, so this would be that kiosk, where everyone goes through that we had at A&E. We just put in a simple intake form saying, if you're doing anything in learning, just fill this out and let us know what you're working on. And we discovered 17 learning units, because it was a global financial institution. 17 units were building agile learning courses. And the cost was astronomical. One was an IT specific version because that operates a little bit differently. And the other one was a general version that they push out from global. So we got rid of 15 pieces of junk. And that duplication, also think about it downstream for that learner. They log into their learning management system, type in agile, and they now get 17 versions. They don't know which one to choose. It's just so we're not helping them either.
This is what the emergency room model could do for workplace learning. Instead of everyone getting the same generic course, people get what they actually need when they need it, delivered by the right specialist in that moment. But implementing that vision requires more than just changing processes. It requires technology and specifically AI.
Learning is going to be most effective and best when it is personalized to each individual. So I can't say this is the box that all learning should go into. And I think we tried to do that for a very long time. We made learning very static and just the same for everyone goes through and they click next to continue. What I'm looking at is really effective learning is one that is hyper personalized to you. What it is that it knows you, it knows what you're working on, it knows how your day has been, it knows how many meetings you've had, it knows what projects you're working on, and it brings that in contextually to actually be applicable in where you are. I think the other thing that good learning does is that it is looking at impact, and if there is no impact, it pivots the learning in ways that will have impact. So it's looking at what is actually successful.
Now, this idea of personalization gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? What does it actually look like in practice?
I know a lot of people don't like the model, but Duolingo, if you look at how they use data and how they use it to not only personalize, but make the learning stickier and better, it's quite fascinating. And in L&D, again, we're giving a static course. I think also too, the thing with good learning is that it is getting you opportunities to practice and reiterate and be able to connect with, say, a virtual coach who's going to look at how you're performing, and it's evaluating and giving you bespoke feedback, not the, you know, you got that wrong, let's try again feedback, but like actually hyper fixated and focused on what you are doing and how that relates to, say, a rubric that the company would like you to perform to. All of those things together are what makes an important learning experience.
Imagine learning that understands your calendar or your current projects and adapts to your actual work context. Instead of this generic course on communication skills, you get specific coaching on how to communicate with a difficult stakeholder that you're meeting tomorrow. This is this closed loop system that SCORM could never provide. Learning that doesn't just track completion, but measures actual behavior change and adapts accordingly. But Laurie goes even further. She envisions learning that breaks out of the traditional course format entirely.
So the example that I gave in the book was, okay, you go onto a learning system or an app and you do level 4 Spanish. What happens is, oh, we know that level 4 Spanish means that you're probably at a pretty good level of Spanish. So the next time you log into, say, Slack or any of your, work tools, it'll come up and say, "Hola, do you want to change your language settings to Spanish to give you that type of practice and hands-on feeling?" And that is a whole other learning experience. And then we start to see how well you're doing with that. And we might say, hey, we see a lot of progress. Do you want to be connected with this person in Colombia who's working on a project that's very similar to the one that we know you've been working on? And start to get that conversation happening. And so now you see how I've taken language learning. The person is probably still taking their courses or their whatever Babbel or Duolingo, whatever it is that they're taking their Spanish in, and they're probably getting tutoring, but now we've embedded it into the way that they are actually working and behaving in their day to day. So that's the way we need to think about learning. It's not just that course. The course isn't going to be the same. Like what I would log into a course is going to be totally different than what you would have, Jack. But it would also be there's tutoring, there's feedback loops, there's practice. All of those things are embedded within it. And they're also fed to me at times that work with how I'm also performing in my day to day. Maybe it has access to my calendar. It knows from the CRM what customers I'm speaking to. So it feeds all of that in to really make a learning experience that is pertinent to me. So I actually perceive or predict that you will have a learning coach, and I hate using learning agent because I know I'm bastardizing the term agent because agent really means something else specifically, but that you will have a AI person, let's put it that way, who is like your co-companion that knows everything that you're working on. It reads your emails, it knows how you're interacting, it sees around corners for you, it coaches you through, it knows, things that you've gone through, things that have gone well, it knows your everything, and it's serving up not only knowledge but critical learning experiences that are mapped to the goals of the company and your personal goals that you're working on. Um, that's really what I see that the future being, so much so that when it comes to skills, there will be an aspect of, oh, we know we're missing this skill. We need 16 people with this skill. We're going to have your coach, talk to you about this skill and see if we can nurture you along. So it would be so precise. And of course, it'll have all of the good things like that. That coach will embed all of the good things like practice and, and feedback, but it will also be doing it in a way that is actually then tied to, do we see outcomes? Do we actually see these things happening? If I wanted to be really honest about where I do see 3 years from now, if I get a little nervous, is Does the line blur? You will have that in your personal life as well, I do believe. So you will have that persona. I already have it. If you, I mean, ask your whatever AI tool you're using, like, tell me my three best personality strengths and my three worst, and it will tell you. Like, it knows things about you. I predict you also have one in your personal life, and the question will be, I think companies will want to tap into that personal one, and I think there's still going to be a divide.
But here's the thing, this isn't some distant future vision. This technology already exists. Companies are already beginning to implement these kinds of systems, and Mindset's helping them do it.
Definitely. I mean, I'm trying not to name companies and brands on that, but there's one in particular that I do absolutely adore. And they've really caught on to this piece of combining productivity, knowledge management, and surfacing what you have in L&D. And really what they're measuring it is from a productivity standpoint. And they've seen massive, massive increases.
So to conclude, the learning trap is real, but it's not inevitable. We're stuck with systems designed 25 years ago for legal compliance, not growth. SCORM, that technical standard that the majority of people never hear about, has imprisoned corporate learning into this world of click next to continue. But the real revelation came from Laurie's emergency room story. Clutching a bottle of vodka whilst being wheeled through Toronto Airport, she discovered the solution: triage. Learning should work like a emergency room, prioritized by need, context, and optimized for actual impact. And the technology to fix this already exists. AI can create learning coaches that knows your work, adapts to your schedule, and provides just-in-time support. And Mindset get to work with companies on implementing this technology into their learning ecosystem. And we're even enabling people to ingest SCORM, finally. This learning trap, therefore, is not permanent. People do want to learn, just not in a dysfunctional way. Or, as Laurie says,
People are always learning. They're learning in other ways, maybe ways that you just can't see.
Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Laurie is such a fantastic speaker, and if you want to contact her, we'll put all of her contact information in the description below. If you've got any comments or feedback, I'd love to hear it. Just drop me a message on whatever channel you prefer. Anyway, I'll see you next week.